Hi everyone, TRGT here with another video. In my last one I talked about all of the things I love in Battle for Azeroth and the thing I'm currently not a big fan of, and that's of course the Azerite Gear. Don't get me wrong, the concept of the Azerite Gear and traits is great and the system has a lot of potential. I do hope that Blizzard doesn't wait too long to implement some new cool looking and interesting class specific Azerite traits, but before we get into the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more WoW content. Right, so in my last video I talked about how I personally found that overall the Heart of Azeroth and the Azerite Gear felt a little bit lackluster. Even the Mythic Plus and Uldir rate Azerite traits are already known and they are again for the most part passives. A lot of people commented on the last video saying that their class does have game-changing Azerite traits, and of course there are some classes that have game-changing traits which are best in slot. However, for most classes, the game-changing traits are either not present or in most cases far behind the best-in-slot ones. I'm pretty sure that currently 70% of the classes in Battle for Azeroth have no gameplay-changing traits that are best-in-slot. Just in general, traits that make the gameplay more interesting. Let me give you guys some examples. The Frostmage has a trait which involves hardcasting flurries. Well, that is a playstyle altering Azerite trait. But it's not the best in slot one, so nobody uses it. Another example is as a Demonology Warlock, you have a trait that gives you a buff, which increases the damage of your next hardcasted Demon Bolt. It works like the legendary Fire Bracers. Well, like the Frostmage, it alters the playstyle, but it's all the way down and is even one of the worst traits available, and the list goes on. That's what I mean with yes, there are game-changing Azerite traits for most classes and specs, but the more important question is, are they really your best in slot ones? Because when they're not in the top 5 of best used recommended Azerite traits, then you're not going to play with them when you have the option of picking, for example, Thunderous Blast, which is best in slot for almost every class. Hold on, yeah, I do know that there are classes and specs, like for example the Balanced Druid, where the game-changing Azerite trait is the top tier choice, and that's great, but they are rather the exception than the norm. While the biggest part of the other classes and specs have some sort of spec-specific trait, but it's not best in slot or just not interesting. I also know that it's still very early on in the expansion, but what I also know is that the first Mythic Plus traits are not mind-blowing, the first raid tier traits are also quite boring, which means that most classes will have to wait another couple of months to maybe finally see some interesting Azerite traits that do contribute something to our gameplay, and herein lies the danger. Let me explain why. From level 110 to level 120, we're just leveling because it's something most of us have to do to get to the endgame content, which will be released next week. That aside, in those 10 levels, we got no new talents or spells. We said goodbye to our legendaries, tier sets, and artifact weapons. Don't think for one moment that I'm a fan of legendaries. At the very start, I hated them as much as anyone else did, but at the end of Legion, the legendary system worked way better. What I'm trying to say here is that a lot of people were expecting more from the Azerite Gear and traits, and now there is a pretty big chance that they will have to wait up until patch 8.1 or even the second raid tier in the hopes for Blizzard to finally implement interesting Azerite traits. The weird thing is that looking at the Azerite traits from a PvP standpoint is totally different, because in those situations you're not always looking for the highest damaging ones, while in PvE the best in slot traits are simply simmed and you take the trait that gives you the most damage increase. What most people do, including me, is visit a website, I will put a link in the description, and simply check which traits are your best in slot ones and use those without asking you any questions. Where were we heading? Oh yeah, the danger is that right now your class didn't get anything new. No new rotational spells or abilities. Besides some exceptions, most classes do play exactly the same with or without the Azerite Gear. The danger here is that I personally think a lot of people will get bored with their class very fast, and that most people will call it a day after they have cleared the first raid tier. New expansions are always great. A lot of people come back to World of Warcraft, subscriptions numbers are booming, but then there is this problem that World of Warcraft has had for the past few years, which is that Blizzard has a really hard time with keeping people subscribed and retain players for longer than a few months. Because believe it or not, most people who take a break or stop playing the new expansions do so within the first 6 months, and then they might resubscribe when a big patch goes live. Personally, for me, Battle for Azeroth can become a great expansion when Blizzard is able to let the Azerite Gear live up to its full potential. My solution would be to add another class spec specific ring to the Azerite Gear and give every class and spec an extra cool rotational button. I know it's easier said than done, but I'm pretty convinced that Blizzard will deliver in creating some new, cool and amazing looking Azerite traits. That is again all for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comment section down below what your opinions are on the Azerite Gear. Do you agree with me? I would like to know your thoughts. As always, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and of course subscribe to the channel for more WoW content. For those of you who are already subscribed, be sure to click on the bell icon and join the notification squad. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.